Good morning. My name is Erin Murphy. I am the DFL Senate Majority Leader, the one majority in the Minnesota Senate and in the legislature, in fact. We are here today. I'm joined by my colleagues, and in particular, Senator Marty, Senator Putnam, Senator Umer Verbatim, to talk about our caucus's priorities for this session. We intend to continue the work that we started 2 years ago to make Minnesota the best place to live, work, and raise a family. Over the last 2 years, we've invested in Minnesotans in many ways, making sure they have real money in their pockets and opportunity in communities across the state of Minnesota with an eye on equity and our future. There are 3 things we have to accomplish this session. The first and top priority for us is balancing the budget, and we're going to do that equitably for communities across the state of Minnesota, focusing on ways to reduce costs in childcare, in housing, and in healthcare, while investing in important things like infrastructure and jobs, so Minnesotans have the ability to support themselves, their families, and their ways of life. We're going to hold the line on the important things that we did accomplish in the last 2 years, things that make life more affordable for Minnesotans, such as the child tax credit, middle-class tax cuts, universal school meals, free college tuition, and consumer protections against corporate interests that are making life more expensive and more difficult for the people of Minnesota. And last but not least, we're going to protect Minnesotans from the things that are coming from Washington, D.C. We're concerned about what we're seeing with the chaos agenda, Trump and his musketeers, and we want to make sure that Minnesotans understand that we're here for them and for our collective future together. Minnesota is in a very strong financial position. We're very proud of the work that we have done. Senator Marty will speak to that. We have a carry forward, a rainy day fund, and a surplus. And if not concerned about things that might happen in Washington, D.C., we would have a job in front of us to balance the budget for the next 2 and 4 years with our eye on the future of the people of Minnesota. But a chaos agenda that is coming from D.C. could serve as a wrecking ball to the stability of our state's budget and to family budgets across the state of Minnesota. We started this session working across the aisle with our colleagues in good faith, with good intention, and we're calling on them now to join us to forestall what we understand could be harmful and damaging budget reductions and policy changes that could really interrupt the way of life for the people of Minnesota and make the work of balancing this budget much more difficult. I have faith in what we can do together here in Minnesota. I always have. I have faith in the people of Minnesota and the work they're doing to build our future. And I know that working together, we can weather any storm and forestall the harm that is coming in our direction. That's the job that we have to do for these next 4 months or so. And with that, I'll turn it over to Senator Marty.
Thank you, Leader Murphy. John Marty, Chair of the Senate Finance Committee. Pleased to be with you. And I think, as the Majority Leader said, we put together a responsible budget 2 years ago. We followed up with it last year. And despite lots of partisan criticism against it, all 3 national bond rating firms have continued to give us AAA ratings, their highest ratings. I think we passed a responsible budget that invests in Minnesota, and our job is to continue that work. With the late start of this session, especially the House just now getting organized, we're going to have a big rush to get this done. We're going to work hard and efficiently in a collaborative, cooperative way, and we think we can do this. Certainly the budget this year, because the next 2-year cycle now comes out and we see that, we're going to be addressing that. We see it's going to be a challenging time, but it's something that we can do. We've shown the ability to do it. We will continue to do it. The only thing that troubles me is deep concern about the Musk-Trump agenda, what the Majority Leader called the chaos agenda. And even if the courts throw out much of it, we don't have a clue what this is going to do. And if the federal government does some of the things, either threats against specific states or overall things that could just devastate parts of the economy, I want to just throw one example out. We're talking about the billion-dollar issue we have to deal with over the next 4 years. The federal government provides Minnesota, and we don't get the most of any state, but provides Minnesota about $8 billion a year, not per biennium, a year in Medicaid funding. If they are talking about cutting that back, which they are, that would just devastate. It's something that state governments, no state government can make up for that kind of cuts. None of them can. It would just devastate people with disabilities. It would shut down hospitals. We're hoping they're not going to do this, but there's great uncertainty because we have no idea what their plans are. So we're going to have to deal with that chaos agenda. And we have to recognize that even if the courts throw out things, some of it may happen. We have good hopes that as they try and shut down various offices, this morning's one about the Consumer Financial Protection Agency. We were proud of the things we did last year. The Taylor Swift bill, the no surcharge, the hidden fees bill. We've done a lot to protect consumers, but now at the federal level, if they just take away a lot of it, we're in deep trouble. So we have a lot ahead of us to do. I'm confident that we can make something happen positively, but it's going to require cooperation from both our Republican colleagues in the Senate, which we're optimistic we're going to have, and same thing in the House, that they're going to have to work things out. But we look forward to putting together a good budget, hoping the federal government does not throw us and other states into a tailspin. Thank you, and Senator Eric Putnam.
Thanks, Senator Marty. How you guys doing? All right? Happy Monday. You know, in the Senate DFL, what we're going to be talking about today and what we're going to be doing all session is not driven by recriminations about the past or about fears about what might happen. We're about what's real and what's right now. So I want to talk a little bit about what's real and right now for farmers across our state and all of greater Minnesota. Now, we hear about federal funds being frozen, then thawed, then frozen again, maybe microwaved. It's really hard to tell what's happening to these federal funds. That lack of certainty is something that farmers already struggle with. Will they have resources? Will they not? They don't know. That additional stress is toxic for farmers and for people in greater Minnesota. Farmers don't know how the weather is going to treat them. They should be able to trust how their government will treat them. But right now, they cannot. My friend Tom has a farm out near Piers. Makes phenomenal popcorn, by the way. You should try it. He received a $530,000 grant from a program funded by the USDA. It's supposed to help farmers like Tom add value to what they grow and to help them hire people to create jobs in greater Minnesota. Tom signed a contract with the federal government. He took out a loan to buy the equipment that he needed, and he tore out his existing production line. But now the federal government won't honor the contract that they both signed. They won't reimburse him. He's already paid $145,000 down payment and has about $400,000 on loan at an 11% interest rate. Right now, the federal government is costing Tom Smoody $3,000 a week in interest. This isn't something that's going to happen, that might happen. That's happening right now. And Tom has to think about laying off some of his employees. Not because of something he fears will happen, but something that already has happened. And our friends in the GOP are telling us to be patient. It's all going to work it out. It's just strange language here and there, or chaos coming from an idiosyncratic individual. I want my friends to help me fix this problem. And if they won't, I want my friends from the GOP to go up to Piers and to explain to the people who are suffering right now that their suffering is not real, that it's a phantom about the future. Because it is real, and it is now. Tom's not afraid that the federal government's going to leave him behind, because it already has. We can't make Tom or his family whole, but we can provide extra supports, invest in rural mental health, and the Farm Business Management Program that provides technical assistance. This session, as always, the Senate DFL will stand up for farmers. Now, you may have heard that eggs are expensive right now. What you may not be aware of is that they're expensive because of bird flu, not because of this president or that president. They're expensive because of an animal emergency event that we struggle with and have always struggled with. But that struggle is getting worse because we can't trust the USDA to keep its obligations and to help support us as we keep our food safe and ourselves safe from animal-borne diseases. Now, last session, the Senate DFL funded turkey lasers to slow the spread of bird flu, and they are 99% effective. But we need more of them throughout the state of Minnesota. And now we need to make sure the Department of Agriculture gets the resources that they need to compensate for known and unknown deficits caused by the disappearance of reliable support from the USDA. You may not know this, but meat inspection in the state of Minnesota, we split it 50-50 with the federal government. If the federal government takes away that money, we will not be able to inspect your meat. We are currently struggling to inspect dairy from bird flu. These problems are getting worse as they're happening. So one of the things that Senate DFL has done and will continue to do is create supports like the Dairy with an Eye program, the Grain Indemnity Fund. These are things that we did in just the last year or two, and we will defend those programs because they give stability in a time of crisis and chaos. Don't even get me started on tariffs. We can talk about that later if you want to. You know they're bad news. We know they're bad news. We've seen this movie before. It's a horror show for farmers, period. We need government we can rely on. And one thing that you can be sure of is that the Senate DFL Caucus stands for Greater Minnesota. We aren't perfect, but we can be trusted to always show up and hear the voice of the farmer. Now I'd like to turn it over to Senator Baden.
Thank you, Senator Putnam. I really appreciate you centering us with a story about how folks are personally impacted by this chaos agenda. My name is Claire Umu-Verbaeten. I have the honor of representing District 66 in the Minnesota Senate. It includes parts of Roseville, Falcon Heights, and Lauderdale, and I also serve as Assistant Majority Leader. The voters elected and re-elected a DFL majority in the Senate with a clear message. Minnesotans wanted us to make long overdue progress for individuals, families, and children in every neighborhood, in every community. They asked and we acted. Because of that people-centered agenda, we took major steps on reproductive freedom and healthcare access, human and civil rights, racial and gender equity. Paid leave and sick time will ensure that the health and wellness of Minnesota's workforce. We also banned non-compete clauses, cracked down on labor misclassification, and raised minimum wages for caregivers and rideshare drivers. We empowered renters to protect themselves from predatory landlords, borrowers from student loan profiteers, and patients and their surviving relatives from medical debt collectors. We put thousands of dollars back into families' budgets with universal meals, the child tax credit, and tuition-free college. We became a safer place for immigrants driving their kids to school, a more democratic place for Minnesotans who served their time, and a more just place for people who were sent to jail or prison for cannabis. We improved public safety by funding our justice system, including public defenders and interpreters. And we also put another $300 million in local aid to let communities decide what makes them safer. And that could be anything from a new fire truck or ambulance to crime prevention or victim services. These are just a few of the accomplishments that we were able to get done, and they're not, political or symbolic. They're very human and tangible. And Minnesotans will live better lives for generations because of the laws and budgets the people called for and that the Senate DFL passed. They were the right thing to do in 23 and 24, and I want to be very clear that we will not roll back or bargain with them in this session or the next. Thank you, and I think we'll stand for questions.
Did you say turkey lasers?
Yeah.
Do you think it's a good idea to get turkeys?
Well, I will tell you one thing, and I know it was just lamenting the lack of funding for the Department of Agriculture, but I think that they've created an entire office just to do AI images of turkeys with lasers. They're absolutely fascinating. Was that a genuine question about what the turkey laser program is?
I've never heard of turkey lasers.
So,
You act like
Can I?
you've all heard of this.
well, you should. It's awesome. You know at airports how they have infrared lasers that deter pigeons from getting into jets? Well, we created a program just this last session. The Senate DFL created a program last session for a cost share with turkey farmers to put similar things on the top of their turkey barns. Because high path comes from waterfowl getting into your turkey barn. So if you can keep the ducks and geese away from your turkeys, you don't get bird flu. And these things are 99.8% successful in deterring the avian influenza. And so it's one of the things I'm very proud that the Senate DFL did that last session. We created this cost share program because they're about $18,000 and you need 2 per barn. And so it's prohibitive for any individual turkey farmer to pay for that themselves. But when you think of the good that they are doing for our public health and for our economy, it's a small price to pay.
I don't know who would specifically want to address this one, but can you explain what's being done around fraud? That's one of the issues, especially with feeding our futures, the trials going on, just that's something that has bipartisan interest right now.
You know, I want to take us back a couple of years ago to the work that we did in 2023, and I've particularly heard Speaker Demuth speak to the fact that no action was taken by Democrats in either body in 23 and 24, and that's patently false. We did a tremendous amount of work, both bolstering the work of the administration on grants administration. We included language in the state government bill that applies across the enterprise regarding grants and monitoring and our ability to detect and prevent. And we did oversight hearings. I did one myself on Veterans Affairs. Many of you may recall that. It was a bipartisan oversight hearing on veterans in the Minneapolis Veterans Home. We take it seriously. We don't believe or support people stealing money from the government. We want people to have faith in the government, and when people do that, they should be prosecuted. The U.S. Attorney has done that. The Attorney General is doing that. Heather Gustafson is proceeding with legislation dealing with an Inspector General for the statewide enterprise. We think that's important, and we'll continue that work as we did in 23 and 24.
We heard a lot just now about sort of the danger of this incoming administration and the potential of wreaking havoc on the state budget, but also about the need to sort of combat some of those policies that are coming in. Is there a way to, be wary of what the budget outlook is, potentially what the impact of the administration on the budget could be, while also sort of counteracting some of these things with new programs, new policies, that sort of thing?
Our members of this caucus after the election came in to meet and were very clear about the things that we wanted to accomplish this session. Priority one, the budget. We want to make sure we're holding the line. And three, very importantly, we are protecting Minnesotans against what we might experience coming from Washington, D.C. We're hearing all sorts of figures about what we could experience in terms of budget impact, especially when you think about our public schools, about the jobs Minnesotans hold as they chop jobs in Washington, D.C. and cut agencies in Washington, D.C., and certainly healthcare. Whether they are making cuts to Medicaid or Medicare, that'll impact hospitals and clinics and providers across the state and the jobs that are related to that. So we are taking very seriously what they are saying so that we can understand that. And I have a number of my members who have been working closely with the administration and with the Attorney General to make sure we understand what is coming forward in terms of executive orders that could hurt individuals that are living here in the state of Minnesota and to fight back. Go ahead.
Is there room for new programs and investments and policies, that sort of thing?
We have to take a close look at the budget and understand it. As I started, we're in a very strong financial position. We're able to balance this budget if we're not going to have a lot of interference coming from Washington, D.C. And yes, I think there is room for us, once we get this forecast, to consider the fiscal outlook for the rest of this fiscal year and the next, and make investments to protect people and to build our future. What is uncertain for us is what is coming from Washington, and we are calling on our Republican colleagues in the Minnesota Senate to help us forestall those cuts in a Republican trifecta in Washington, D.C., and to help us make sure that we balance this budget for the people of Minnesota. It's job number one.
Do you think the upcoming forecast will give a better indication of where the room is for that?
Yeah, we always wait for that second forecast to balance the budget. That'll be on March 6th.
Senator Morgan mentioned that it's going to be impossible, almost impossible to replace some of these funds. I mean, really, realistically, I hear what you're saying, but you've got that Republican trifecta, you've got polls showing that actually these cuts are incredibly popular, and that the president is following through on his promises. That's according to the CBS poll, 70% of people
Sure,
surveyed say that.
in theory, well, yeah, I mean, what he promises to do is nothing to do what's good for America. I mean, I think what people are talking about, egg prices. One of the reasons he got elected was because of high egg prices and inflation prices. Egg prices have been going up. These other things, yeah, he's kept his promises to attack people. He's kept his promises and things like that I think a lot of Minnesotans are very worried about. I think we want to protect against that. But in terms of the budget, as you said, we can't replace the two biggest areas where we get funding are our two biggest areas, education and human services. And those kind of cuts, if they're to do them, would be absolutely devastating. And every state is going to be in the same mix there. And again, it's not the state government that's hurt. It's the people with disabilities, it's the seniors in nursing homes, it's people struggling to pay for health care, it's the hospitals who can't make ends meet without the budget coming in. And that kind of numbers are going to be just atrociously large, and so we're hoping that doesn't happen. The one thing I guess we should say about this, I heard somebody describe it as everything about the federal budget, the chaos, is uncertain, except for the fact they don't want any oversight. I mean, we're having a bill heard, I think tomorrow in state and local government on Heather Gustafson's Inspector General office. Federal government, Trump fired, I think it's 15 or 16 inspectors general, probably illegally. But he's firing that because we don't want anybody overseeing what we're doing. Well, here in Minnesota, I think there's bipartisan support to make sure we are as good and as efficient as we can be as a government. But in terms of affecting it, we don't know what's going to come, and we have to face it as it comes.
Follow-up question, your thoughts on the governor's budget, which does call for cuts in the expansion of some social programs in addition to a tax cut on just general sales tax?
Right. I think that the governor's budget's a good starting point to work from. I think all 4 caucuses in the legislature see it as a starting point and so on. I think a lot of us have concerns about parts of it. I think we think other parts are very good, but that's what all of our committees are going to be looking at and putting together their own budgets based on what they see the needs and the problems are. And I think they'll be hearing, I think some of our committees have already heard the governor's budget. They're going to be hearing more. We're taking it seriously, but I don't think that you should see that as that's what the Senate DFL is going to be in favor of.
What specifically are your concerns?
I don't want to get into all the details because, again, our chairs are just looking at it now and so on.
And it is the legislature's responsibility to set the state's budget. You know, the governor always proposes something, but it is the work of the legislature to set the state's budget, and we will take a look at what he's had to offer, but set our own course.
Folks, we have time for one more.
How are you approaching working with the House over the next month before the special election?
Directly, as much as we can, because, of course, they are an important part of the legislative process.
Just to follow that a little bit, I mean, you're gonna be working with the House Republican Caucus, you're gonna need Republican support from here on out through the next 2 years, even if the tie returns to the House. I mean, what does that look like if you want to pass policy that aligns with DFL priorities?
Minnesotans have elected a narrowly divided legislature. We knew that on Election Day. We're going to work with our colleagues across the state of Minnesota, remembering this. Minnesotans sent in this legislature, 201 legislators. Every one of us has a responsibility to represent the districts that we've come from and the people and the interests. We're going to have to do that respecting one another because that is the voice of Minnesotans. And I will implore, we will work with our colleagues across the aisle to make sure that they understand what the consequences of some of the decisions that might come our way will be for communities across the state of Minnesota, and ask them to join us to forestall the harm, to make sure that every community across the state has the capacity to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.